Hello again. So, I wanted to share something a little more positive with you all. Some good news. Yesterday at work, we had a young patient, younger, my age, chef's age, the husband's age, who went into cardiac arrest with COVID. And we saved him. This patient was receiving care prior to in one of our units on a certain machine called an ECMO machine. And if you're not familiar, I'll put a little description down in the link below of what ECMO is. The acronym ECMO, ECMO, stands for extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. So basically, this person's body was in such a state that a machine has to oxygenate their blood outside of the body and then put it back into their body so that it can spread through all of their organs. It's basically to give their heart and their lungs a rest, and the machine does it for them while they heal. So with my job, I monitor everybody's heart rates and heart rhythms throughout the entire hospital, including the children's hospital. This patient's alarms went off, and immediately our protocols kick in, and I call the nurse immediately and let them know where to go and what is happening, and to basically, prepare to call for code blue if they go in there and they see that, yep, they are in fact in cardiac arrest. It's not just them, moving around. In this case, this person wasn't moving around, but it wasn't a false reading. But this person was definitely in cardiac arrest. The rhythms that were coming up and not coming up deemed that. And this nurse was she was in treating or caring for another patient. And when I told her, I could hear her running down the hall, and then she was saying, hey, code, doing what she needed to do to get the team ready. Once she got into the room, I heard, I think she just accidentally forgot to push the hang up button on her phone, so I could hear everything, but I let her go, and then I let my charge nurse know on my unit that, hey, there is a code on this floor, on another floor. I don't think I mentioned that this patient was actually on another floor, and I could overview them. I can see them from my floor. That's how most hospitals with cardiac telemetry systems are set up. So I let my charge nurse know, and then all the charge nurses from the units, when you have a code blue like this, they all go down to that room, and they each play a role in this scenario. They each play a role to resuscitate this individual if it's legal to do so, meaning if they don't have a DNR or a post in place saying do not resuscitate, basically, or comfort measures only. It really depends on what all these documents say. But in this case, he was a full code, meaning we run the full protocol to try to save their life. While they were doing that, I can see on the monitor where I'm watching all these patients, I can see actually the steps. I can tell when they start compressions. I can tell what rhythm the patient is in, if they're starting to resuscitate or have a ROSC, which is a return of spontaneous circulation, meaning return of spontaneous circulation is when your body starts up on its own. It doesn't need, obviously, assistance. Now, the kicker is this individual was already in a pretty dire state, needing to be on ECMO in the first place. But we did obtain a return of spontaneous circulation to that patient's baseline, which is not necessarily a baseline of conscious health, meaning they are awake and making their own decisions and they can get up and walk around. This patient was not doing that, but we did actually, to their baseline, have a return of spontaneous circulation. And they were then transferred to our ICU. And it just felt or seemed like hopeful, you know. I don't know if you saw any of the Vlogmas vlogs from last month, but there were a couple where I was having a really, really tough time because of the things that were going on at work and how bad it was getting. And mind you, we are still seeing the effects of the Christmas and New Year surges. It's still bad. But to have this patient who was in the state that they were in live, the rhythm that they were in when they went into cardiac arrest, I could see them fighting to live. If that makes any sense. It was not, that heart did not want to go for too long into cardiac arrest. You can see them just trying really, really hard. That the heart was. Which brings me to an understanding for you, some education, and an understanding for you as well as for me of how I process all of this. Sometimes I will have so many feelings. Again, I just cannot speak, but I may be crying, I may be just completely overwhelmed that I can't speak. So when I'm going through a situation like that, where I'm so excited and happy and joyful and just overwhelmed, but at the same time a little nervous because I don't know what's going on next with all of our teams and everything, and how stressful things are, not people, well, people too, and what's next for all of our teams and all of our patients, and how this affects the hospital overall, having to pause care for all of our other patients, as far as all of these individuals that have to go down to this code. They then have to pass their duties on to somebody that can cover them. So then that person now has double duty. And we're talking anywhere from like 8 to 10 people that it takes in a hospital, okay, to sustain life and to try to save a life. That's 8 to 10 people. And there are some days where we have 2-3 code blues in a day. So I'm not sure actually how many of you know how the beehive works when we have a code blue. And I have experience with the hospital setting as well as the out of hospital setting, or what they call the pre-hospital setting. In the hospital setting, you're gonna have somebody on the person's chest. You're gonna have somebody working the airway. You're going to have somebody trying to start a line if they don't already, have that in place. It depends on the setting. Otherwise, you're going to have that same person or even another person getting all the medications that they're going to need to restart the heart. You have another person who's writing everything down. Times, when everything was done, etc., etc. You're going to have somebody else who is directing everybody and overseeing. And then if possible, you're going to have transport ready to go to transport this patient, depending on where they are, to the ICU. Or if it's a stroke, for example, you're going to have them going over to CT. So you're going to have your transport team ready to go. And then afterwards, you're going to have another person there who is restocking and replenishing everything. And in this case, we have to restock and replenish a lot more these days because we have all of that COVID gear that we have to put on. And mind you, this is one-time use COVID gear. Once we don this gear and we use it in the same room as the person with COVID, you gotta doff and dispose of it properly. And that's it. You can't use it on another person depending on what unit it is. It's similar in the pre-hospital setting. Generally, you're going to have 4 guys on an engine and women. When I say guys, by the way, I don't mean just men or males. 4 guys, like, hey guys, how you doing? It means everybody, right? Just to make that clear. You're going to have 4 guys on an engine and 2 on the ambulance. The box is what they say. So that's 6. And it's a similar setup where you're going to have me, the EMT, for example. Depending on what my medic would assign me, I could be airway. I could be chest compressions. I could be at the box, the smaller box, the med box, handing them medication. I could be putting the pads. That's another thing that I forgot for the hospital setting is setting up the pads on the defib pads on the patient. In an ambulance, you have a cardiac monitor and defibrillator that you carry with you. It's super heavy. Although I think they're getting lighter and smaller. Not all jurisdictions have these, but they are getting smaller and lighter. So you could be setting up the defib pads. And then with some jurisdictions, we have what's called a Lucas device, which is an automatic device that you put this board, a small board, underneath the patient's back. And then there's like a big loop like this that goes over their chest. And in the middle is a pad. And you turn this sucker on and it goes boom, boom, boom. So it basically replaces the person who's doing chest compressions, which frees up hands to be able to transport. So you got to lift the patient up, or put them on a scoop, basically lift the patient up, put them on the gurney, and then get them into the ambulance and be on your way. Now, each protocol in each jurisdiction is slightly different, especially because the AHA has changed things because of COVID. So don't take my direct word for all of this. I know I'm super rules and routine and specific. Follow it. What I'm saying now is go look it up. Check your local jurisdiction, see how it works. And then you're going to have a person who's writing things down. And then usually that's the captain that's writing everything down for the pre-hospital setting. The captain of the engine that's come to the call, which is the fire engine, if I didn't say that already. The captain's usually the one who is writing everything down. And the paramedics and the EMTs are the ones who are doing all the work. So yeah, there's usually 6 of us. Some volunteer departments, sometimes there's only 4. Sometimes if they're so busy, guys, if they're getting so many calls, the fire department may not even show up with EMS, and it's just EMS running a full code like that. It's 2 guys. That's a lot of work for 2 guys. And mind you, once again, because of COVID, they're all donning and doffing their PPE. There's a lot of paperwork that has to happen. There's a lot of cleanup that has to happen. There's a lot of replenishing and restocking of your supplies that has to happen after each of these codes. And that's just code blues. Sometimes we have like code greens where somebody falls, and guess what? We have another team who has to go and check on that person, or we have what's called an RRT, rapid response team, where it may not be a code blue, but the person's mentation is changing. It could be code stroke. We have multiple of these in a trauma center. Okay, so seeing that with some of these teams, some of them it's 6 people, some of them it's 8 to 10 people that it takes to take care of one person each time. It's like a beehive. It's like an anthill. And that's literally what I see every time something like this happens. And when I was an EMT, I was working the 911 side down in California. That's literally what happens. You have a bunch of ants and bees from this hive and from this anthill moving around. They each have their own role that they have to play that contributes to the greater whole. So in a sense, community coming together for one disadvantaged person, there is a place for it. We do have room for it here. No matter how independent we all think we are here, there is a place for that. Now, sure, I get it. We are paid to do these things. This is our job. This is our role. We chose a role in which we contribute to a greater whole, and oftentimes for the benefit of the few disadvantaged people. It's generally what public service is, what a humanitarian service is, humanitarian aid. And so, going back to that analogy of the ants and the bees, that's literally what I see in my brain, and I can even hear the bees. Whenever something like this, an event like this happens and a protocol is activated, that's literally what's going through my head. And that's what I see, and I hear the bees buzzing around. The association, the photographic association of the autistic brain in a lot of individuals is very, very strong. So when you hear us describing things in an analogous way, we're literally mapping out our brain to you. Sometimes neurotypicals, a lot of them, they don't see the world in that way. But if you've ever wanted to know what is inside of the brain of a neurodiverse person or somebody with autism, and we're literally telling it to you directly, it's the beehive, it's this, it's that. It's an anthill. For neurotypicals, think of analogy. That will help you understand. Going back to the celebration that was yesterday, we saved life. And I think it should be emphasized that others who play my role in hospitals, we're often on another floor, even in another part of the hospital. We're able to see your loved ones and how they're doing. And we have the ability to sound the alarm when our nurses are so busy caring and doing their rounds for all their other patients. And right now on some floors and units in our hospital, we've got one nurse for 4 to 5 patients on busy days. And that's what's been happening lately. It's really bad, guys. It's really bad. Usually, you'll probably have one nurse for 3 to 4 plus a CNA, certified nursing assistant, to help 2 nurses with basically the same number of patients. We've got a little more help, but lately, it's not what's been happening. Going back to the hospital and how amazing it is and the technology that we have. Now, granted, there's improvements. I have ideas for how we can improve the system that I use and the hardware, software and hardware that I use and that is put on the patients so that we can be quicker to save lives. But let me tell you, this patient, I was watching them from a completely different floor, was able to sound the alarm to another unit on another floor to say, hey, go save their life. Go check on them. That is amazing. That's amazing that we have these redundancies in place to watch over your loved ones. Aside the CNAs that are there and the nursing staff, and then the way that we have things set up where the charge nurses go around and they're also checking on everybody. I'd say if you could, go take a tour of a hospital, but we can't right now because of the COVID. But for those of you that have family members in the hospital who are currently fighting COVID, we're doing our best. We got a lot of people watching over your loved ones in that hospital. We're doing our best. But I know that we're slowly getting our vaccines. But keep wearing your masks. Keep distance, keep washing up, keep doing all those things, because as you know, the virus is mutating very quickly. And it can still, even though you got the vaccine, they still have to run longer term studies to see if, the vaccines will cover these other strains. It's still unknown right now. So as a precaution, please, please, please help us out. Help us hospital workers out. Because as you can see, this person was very young and they required a lot of equipment and a lot of support and a lot of staff. And it really does cause a lot of burnout when we do become so overwhelmed, which we're starting to get towards that again, where we could become so overwhelmed. It's very traumatic as well, seeing this regularly. Now, when I was an EMT, went through a lot of trauma. There were times where, for some reason, it was like a wave of traumatic events that would come through. And we'd kind of have like a theme of the week where it was just like, rollover motor vehicle accidents or shootings or stabbings. It's like, for some reason, it was just like the way of the world at that point or for that week. It's like, why are we seeing so many of these? I don't understand. But you go in and you do your job. And that doesn't mean that it's still not traumatic. Doesn't mean that it doesn't cause burnout. Seeing that it takes so many people and all of those people are going to respond to this trauma and this burnout differently. That's a lot of people. Celebrate life. Do the best that you can. You got to maintain your sanity. Totally get it. Please be safe. You saved one yesterday. You'd like to be able to do more of that. But if we're too overwhelmed, we're going to have to start triaging again. We've already, on a wider scale, triaged. We're already doing that. But if it comes down to the micro level of each individual hospital and then each individual unit to have to triage, you don't want to see that. Please be safe out there, guys. We saved one.